Have you ever thought about what it would take to build a brand new country? I mean, not with armies and revolutions, but starting it online, kind of like a tech company. Well, today we're diving deep into a really wild idea for what a nation could be, all based on the book The Network State. So how could this possibly work? Let's get into it. All right, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the book's argument for why old-school nations are kind of losing their power. Then we'll take a hard look at whether we can even trust our history books. After that, we'll see how the internet is creating totally new power structures, define what a network state actually is, and finally, look at the really high-stakes future this whole concept is pointing towards. Okay, so the entire argument of this book kicks off with a huge claim that the very foundations of our world, the nation-states we all live in, are beginning to crack. The author calls these big organizing forces leviathans, and he lays out this super interesting history of how they've evolved. You know, back in the 1800s, the ultimate boss was God. You behaved because you were worried about divine judgment. Then the 1900s roll around, and the state becomes the new sheriff in town. You follow the law because the government's got police and prisons. But now we're in the 21st century, and there's a new power rising, the network. We're talking the internet, social media, crypto, the whole digital shebang. In this quote, this gets right to the heart of that power shift. The book makes the case that sometime around the mid-2000s, encryption became the most powerful force on the planet. Think about it. A government can have all the tanks and nukes it wants, but it can't use brute force to break a cryptographic key. The network has a kind of power that the state just can't counter with its old-school tools. Now, it's not just that state power is fading. The author argues that we're also in the middle of a major crisis of trust, a crisis with the very institutions that are supposed to tell us what's true. This right here is the gut punch. The source argues that if we can watch major news outlets get the present completely wrong, right in front of our eyes, how on earth can we trust the history they wrote? The moment you admit that news today can be twisted, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about the past. And the book gives some pretty specific examples that have just shredded public trust. I mean, remember the wall-to-wall Russiagate coverage that just fizzled? Or the models showing a 91% chance of a Clinton win in 2016? Or that award-winning podcast, Caliphate, that turned out to be built on a total fabrication? These aren't just little slip-ups. They're huge narrative failures that create a really deep sense of skepticism. This all leads to a really critical distinction the book makes between what it calls political truth and technological truth. Political truth is basically stuff that's true because we all agree it is, like a country's border. But technological truth, that's objective reality. The value of pi is the value of pi, no matter who's president. It's provable with math and data, and that's exactly where the network gets its power. And we have seen technological truth win time and time again. When the New York Times ran a story about a Tesla, Elon Musk just released the car's data logs, showing the reporter had been driving in circles. When President Macron tweeted an old photo of a fire to make a political point, a simple metadata check, a timestamp, proved it was fake. A blockchain entry even settled a patent case in a Chinese court. Every time, hard, verifiable data beat a story that was just politically convenient. So, look, if the old systems are failing and our trust is shot, what's next? Well, the book argues that the solution is actually already bubbling up from the internet itself. This slide really lays out how the network is throwing punches at the old guard. First, you've got the crypto economy, money like Bitcoin that governments can't just print more of or easily seize. Then there's peer-to-peer communication, which lets us talk to each other without going through state-run media. We're building online social tribes that can feel more real than our national identity. And of course, remote work. That's the ultimate trump card. It gives you the power to just leave a place you don't like without quitting your job. Okay, so this brings us right to the core of the whole thing. With all this new power, all these new online communities, how do you make it official? What does a nation actually born from the internet look like? Here it is. A network state is basically a social network that forms around a shared belief. It grows a real sense of we're a people, it learns how to act together, and then, and this is the key part, it starts crowdfunding physical land all over the globe. It's a nation that starts in the cloud and then touches down in the real world. And the book actually gives a surprisingly practical step-by-step guide. Step 1, find a startup society online. Get people together who share a vision. Step 2, organize that community so it can act as one, kind of like a digital union. Step 3, use that collective power to crowdfund physical places, apartments, houses, maybe even whole towns, all connected online. And finally, step 4, once you have a huge population, a real economy, and a bunch of property, you go to existing countries and ask for diplomatic recognition. And we're not talking about some small niche community here. The source pictures a network state with 1.7 million citizens. To put that in perspective, that's bigger than countries like Estonia or Luxembourg. These people wouldn't all live in one spot. They'd be spread out everywhere, but united online. But why? Why go to all this effort? This quote really gets to the heart of the motivation. It's all about getting a clean slate. It's the desire to build something totally new without being dragged down by centuries of old fights and broken systems. It's basically applying startup thinking to the very idea of a nation. And finally, the book doesn't just present this as some cool thought experiment. It frames it as an absolutely necessary path forward, especially when you look at the other futures we might be facing. So the author lays out this really stark choice. On one side, you have what he calls American anarchy, a future where the West just kind of decays into chaos, infighting, and total collapse of its institutions. On the other side is Chinese control, a future dominated by a super efficient, centralized surveillance state that then exports that model of control to the rest of the world. The network state is presented as the third way out. It's a path that tries to navigate between the chaos of total breakdown and the iron fist of tyranny. It's an alternative that isn't built on force or where you were born, but on voluntary choice and shared ideals. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Why does it matter? Well, for one, it's a potential blueprint for creating new ways to govern ourselves, peacefully. It's a way to use our amazing digital tools, the bits, to finally get some real innovation happening in the physical world of atoms, which has been stuck for a while. And maybe most importantly, it completely challenges the idea that you have to be governed by the people who control the patch of dirt you live on. It suggests the passport in your pocket might one day matter less than the online communities you're a part of. And all of this leaves us with one massive, fascinating question for the future. For years, the internet has basically been a mirror, reflecting our physical world. But we might be on the verge of a new era, an era where the digital world stops just mirroring and starts building, creating entirely new societies, new economies, and maybe even new nations, straight from the cloud.